Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is a little bit just about sort of what I do as a sports scientist, but just my thoughts on what a sports scientist is and why you, even if you're not a professional athlete, probably need a sports scientist in your corner to get the most out of your training and race. The way I look at it is a sports scientist's role primarily is to just problem solve. So if you've got a question about performance, about training, about recovery, nutrition, fatigue, injury, etc., we're here to take that question, go find out the answer, and then bring it back. So basically, you can think about us as like being Google. I mean, you type your question into us, we get it, we look at it, we analyze it, we bring all the information together, and then help you find a solution to get to a positive outcome. It's the type of thing that anyone can benefit from having a sports scientist or someone involved in sports science on their team, regardless if they're a professional athlete or not. And the key example is probably even more so in age group amateur racing, where little tweaks to things, and it's not even little things, but major things in training programs that are just a little bit misinformed, and a bit of problem solving to work out a better structure of training in the week to manage fatigue or load monitoring. Why is this athlete always breaking down at the same point of their training preparation for a big key event? Little things like this can be easily problem solved by a sports scientist, and it's the type of thing that most of the time good coaches will have a bit of knowledge in this area. But at the end of the day, I think the differentiating factor is that a sports scientist is there from a research, understanding, problem solving perspective. The coach is there to apply that knowledge and then distribute it to the athlete to then program and implement. So in like a triangle situation where it's like, I'm here, the athlete's there, the coach is there, and we can all talk between each other to get to the best outcome, pooling all our resources inside that triangle, which is going to give us the best result possible. So you'll notice that a lot of the high performing athletes go to the Olympics and things like that, all have sports scientists around them. Why is that the case? Because they're looking for the 1-2% absolute minimal gain at the very, very top to make them that 0.1 of a second faster over 100 meters, or that's a lot actually, 0.001 of a second faster over 100 meters, or to make them a couple of minutes faster over a marathon. All of these little tweaks, these 1% gains for them, are what makes the difference. But when we extrapolate that out to the average age group athlete, those gains that those sports scientists are receiving or providing or able to tap into for an elite athlete end up turning into 5, 8, 10, even up to sort of 15% improvements for the average age group athlete, or the amateur athlete who's not racing professionally but they're at the top of their category, getting into triathlon after being a marathon runner, and they're trying to transition sports. It's just making the most of the resources you've got. Like I said, it has to be this network for it to work effectively, whether if you're an athlete that's self-coached, or if you have a coach, or if you're a coach watching this and you have athletes and you're like, well, I don't want to bring a third person in because they're just going to steal my ideas, or I don't want to feel like they're doing all my work for me, or they're going to steal my athlete and just do it directly. Some of it is going to be a bit like that. That's the reality of the industry. I mean, people who anyone in endurance who's somewhere in this sports science coaching space typically does a bit of both, because we just don't have these open lines of communication. I'm going to be very, very blatantly honest and say that the industry at the moment is just terrible from this regard, where coaches don't want to talk to each other and help each other, but then also coaches aren't willing to seek out the help that they probably need to then help their athlete in return. The ones that I've worked with in terms of coaches that have come and sought the information and want to know more, want to learn, want to use me as a resource to collect this new set of knowledge for them, piece it together, distribute it to them so they can apply it into their athletes' programs, are the ones who end up having really successful athlete results. And there's no, I guess, guessing where that's coming from. It's because they're giving themselves the best possible chance, and if anything, I'm helping them do their job better than they could have done before, or enhancing their experience that they can then pass on to their athletes. So really, I guess, squashing a couple of myths, a sports scientist isn't here to just take over and do everything for you. Absolutely not. We're here to problem solve, and we're here to answer questions and research and look for the innovative ways and tweak things and bring the science into the training side of things. And then it's the coach or the athlete's job to then apply it and actually do the work. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the primary bit that is going to make the major difference. If you don't do the work, you're not going to get anywhere. But it's that first step of bringing a sports scientist in is the type of thing that can really just enhance the quality of that application, because you understand better, you have all the information in front of you, you can make those right decisions. Probably the second sort of myth is that, yeah, the sports scientist is just going to come in and be like, no, you can't do that because that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Everything has its purpose. Maybe there's going to be some recommendations that are going to be made in terms of sports scientist comes in. I come in and go, based on the research, that's probably not what we're seeing. Is it working though practically? Because we know that a lot of the research is very theoretical, lab based. We can't control for some factors in the practical world, which may actually be enhancing your performance, like going out and doing a massive amount of volume. If that's working for your athlete and they're not breaking down, not getting injured, by some of the research may not be the best way to go about it. But in terms of, gee, we've got these big spikes in acute training load because these big volume hits, but if the athlete's handling it really well and it's actually increasing their performance, then maybe from a practical standpoint, it's actually quite useful. So it's the type of thing that we're weighing up those options. We're looking at what's the best viable outcome. Again, coming back to pulling all our resources, if we have all the information or as much information as we can find, we can then narrow it down to what's the most applicable. And another sort of key point in terms of what sports scientists do is, and I'm heavily involved in it at the moment, is the testing side of things. So helping understand where an athlete's performance is at, whether that's using technology, analysing the data, just looking at what their training's like. A new fresh set of eyes on a training program as a very basic starting point is a really, really easy way to pick up 1 or 2% in any athlete's training program. I can guarantee a coach that's coached someone, if you had a coach for 3, 4, 5 years, you've probably easily worked out by sort of 6 months into them coaching you that they've got a particular way about going things, a particular pattern to that coaching. Nothing wrong with that pattern, nothing wrong with a particular way of going about things. I have my methodologies if I'm going to write programs, things like that. But having someone external come and look at that from an objective sort of standpoint and looking at going, all right, well, what have you tried to do here? Try and understand the process and then go, where are some areas we can improve this? Or where are some tweaks we can make to make this even better? I honestly don't get why people in our industry think that's such a negative when it's clearly such a massive positive. The biggest frustration I always see is when I have athletes come in and they don't tell their coach they're coming in to see me for testing or seeing me for some consulting advice. They bring their program in and their program's just like 20 minutes easy, hour moderate, or hour tempo or hour race pace, whatever you want to call it. And it's just very minimal description. The first thing I say to them is like, well, let's do some testing so we can understand what your data's like from a performance standpoint now. Let's take some of those numbers, heart rate, intensity, whether it's power or pace, things like that. We can take all that information. What are your strengths and weaknesses in your physiology from the testing data? Are we seeing any patterns from a clear strength or a clear weakness perspective? Can we maximize our training around those weaknesses and maintain those strengths to then improve overall? But then also just implement some more objective measures. What intensity do we have to hit to improve our ability to tolerate lactic acid or tolerate fatigue? What intensity do we have to hit to build a bit more aerobic capacity, aerobic base? All these things, we can get very, very specific, but it's not a very difficult process from the outset. The big frustrating thing is when an athlete comes in, sees all this, and then they haven't told their coach in the first place, and we have a disconnect of I'm talking to the athlete here, athlete's talking to the coach over there, there's no third connection between myself and the coach or between each other passing information on. And then the coach thinks I'm trying to steal that athlete and trying to coach them. And so one thing I really, really dislike is that then they just start bashing on you like, oh, don't try and take athletes and that's not the way we do it, blah, 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 blah. It's fine to have your opinion and things like that, but at the end of the day, if I'm trying to help you and provide advice, which that's going to be beneficial to you as a coach to then coach more athletes and coach more successful athletes, but then also you as an athlete to then improve your own performance if you're coaching yourself, or to then pass back to your coach to get your personal performance happening at a higher level. I don't really see why people could see that as a negative. To me, it seems very logically positive that you're going to use every resource you can. And a coach has got a bunch of knowledge and years of experience in the sport itself, but a sports scientist can also look at it and go, all right, this is what we've seen in cycling. How can I take that and apply that to triathlon? This is particularly something that springs to mind is aerodynamic position in triathlon across the board by and large. It's pretty average. There's a lot of things that we could do for a lot of athletes, even at the professional level, to make them even more aerodynamic and save a lot more energy, produce less power for the same speed, etc. Typically, it's just a case of, oh, well, we just need to train harder or we need to train more to get you fitter to make you go faster. Well, not necessarily. The big sort of example I use is, if you've watched any of the Road to Busso series I put up end of last year, is I went and did my bike fit, got really, really aero, punched out to average wattage of 200 watts over 90 Ks and did a 2:27 bike split. At other races, similar type of athletes, so a little bit older than I am, but putting out similar times. I've had guys come in and show me data across their race. They're averaging 230, 240 watts, and they're putting out the same speed as I was. That's a huge disconnect. Obviously, there's going to be power meter variances. I understand that, but 30 to 40 watt difference, there's not going to be a power meter error that much. That, I mean, if you're putting out 240 watts and you're getting a correct reading on your power meter on your bike, and you're riding the same speed as someone putting out 200 watts, there's a big margin for improvement that you could bring about changing position and looking at the analytics of and the science of aerodynamics and just understanding how air moves over an object. How can we minimize the resistive forces to then overcome it? All of that, a coach may not just have the expertise in, so they've never thought of and never looked at. They've got expertise in training and getting you fitter and things like that. But from a technical side of things, may not have that direct knowledge or ability to manipulate position and things like that to then also bring about, all right, maybe we can squeeze out a little bit more watts in terms of power on the bike because we're in a more economical or efficient position on the bike. But then also, how can we become more aero so we don't have to put out as much power to get the same speed result? What's that going to do? It's going to save us energy later in the race. We're not going to burn our matches before we've got to the run or to the back end of the bike, etc. And in sort of summary, it's a case of research, bring the research in together, provide some practical recommendations to then ultimately improve athlete performance, but then also improve coaching practice as well. I'm here to help athletes and coaches. I'm not here to step on anyone's toes or anything like that. Everyone can have their own opinions and ideas on paths on how to get there. I'm just there to bring some information to the table that's going to make those paths, instead of being dirt tracks, let's turn them into 4-lane highways where they're going to be super fast and super efficient. Hopefully you've enjoyed a little bit about hearing my sort of thoughts on sports science and why it's not just the pros and the elite guys who need to be using these resources. They are available to everyone. You just have to know where to look. If you want to get in contact about anything that you're doing from a training or racing perspective that you'd like some advice on, I'm free to chat. So if you want to get in touch, either hit me up with a DM, social media, send me an email, whatever you prefer to do. Happy to have a chat about how sports science can help you in your own training performance and maybe help your coach as well. Or if you're a coach and you want to learn a bit more about the science of endurance performance in particular, happy to also have a chat and tear that up. And we can just throw out some ideas. And it's just a case of just getting an understanding for what we do in the sports science field, but then also asking a bit more of an understanding of what you do day to day as a coach and your background, your philosophies. How can we then match that up to get the best result for the athletes? Because at the end of the day, that's the ultimate goal. We both want the athlete to succeed and be as fast and effective as possible, achieve their goals, etc. Minimize injury. We've got very, very similar overall or overarching principles. It's just a case of we might be looking at it from two different lenses, which at times is very, very useful. Two perspectives can be a lot better than one, and working in a team, we can just generate a little bit better ideas or more creativity around the way we get to those end results to make it as fine-tuned as possible for that individual person and that athlete. So again, hope you enjoyed this one. There's going to be more of my thoughts going up in the next little while just about things, but hopefully it gives you a bit of an insight into what it's like being a sports scientist. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.